so much for joining us today and welcome to today's session. My name is Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the manager of public education partnerships and e-learning at Mental Health America's national office, and I'll be helping to moderate today's webinar. Just a few notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but if you would like to request a certificate of attendance, I have a form that you can fill out to receive a certificate. I'll post the link to that in the chat here shortly, and that will also be included in your follow-up email. And now to introduce our speaker for today, with us, we have Dr. Christine Coleman, who is the founder and CEO of People of Color Thriving, a private practice specializing in the intersection of mental health and diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is also the founder and executive director of Soul Sisters, a nonprofit with a mission to helping women overcome societal barriers by providing educational and empowering experiences that promote personal and professional evolution. Dr. Coleman is an executive coach to women of color leaders and recently founded the Women of Color Thriving Collective. She has 15 years of clinical training, predominantly in service to marginalized communities. Dr. Coleman's current practice prioritizes the psychological and emotional well-being of BIPOC professionals. She also supports companies and organizations with mental health inclusivity and belonging initiatives so that they can better prioritize the psychological well-being and retention of employees, particularly those of color. She has trained leading companies like Pinterest, Business Wire, Coursera, MuleSoft by Salesforce, and the Major League Baseball Network. Welcome, Dr. Coleman. We are extremely excited to have you here speaking today on such an important and timely project, with it being Hispanic Heritage Month. So thank you so much for being here, and I will let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Jackie. Hello, everybody. I am beautifully overwhelmed by all of the presence here today from all over the place. I am seeing some folks who are close to me. I see Oakland in the house. I'm in Oakland, California. I have also lived various places throughout the United States, and I also saw some folks outside of the United States. So gracias, bienvenidos. Thank you all for having me. I know my last name, Coleman, throws people off. I am a Latina, and I'm proud of it. And I'm also here to just, again, welcome you all to this really important celebratory topic that we're going to be talking about today. So as you continue to get settled in, I'm going to pull up my slides so we can be guided with them and by them today. I also hope to continue to make this time together a collective opportunity, not just me talking to y'all, but really having a good time together, talking to each other, looking at the chat box and so forth. I want to let you know before I jump into a little bit more about myself and the talk we're going to be having today. I'm going to do my very, very best to keep up with everybody in the chat box. I love the interaction. Please know if I miss anything that's said or asked, it is not intentional. I want to be mindful of keeping track of the time, the information I want to deliver today, as well as engaging with all of you. So let's roll into it. Today we're talking about Yo Pertenezco Aquí. I belong here. We're going to be exploring the importance of belonging for the Hispanic Latinx community. You'll notice, and I'll explain further in just a moment, I use those terms interchangeably, and in just a moment you will understand why if that seems unclear to you. If you do understand why, then bravo, we're going to continue to keep it moving. The intro was already shared. Thank you, Jackie. I will not spend too much time on this. What I do want to forward down to towards the lower part of this here is to share my personal mission. My personal mission is to help destigmatize and promote equitable mental health access, specifically in communities of color. So I know that you all are here because you are either a Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic identifying person, and some of you might be allies, supporters, accomplices here to say, I want to show up, I want to learn more, I want to be a better community member, a better workplace member, and so forth. So we are here in good company together, and my heart is here with you all as we continue to unpack some things that are going really well in our workplaces and communities, and some areas that we can continue to improve. Before I roll in, I'm going to go back to this chat box here. Again, I see you all. I'm so excited that you're here today. Can you all do me a favor? If there are any, again, Latinx, Hispanic folks in the house, can you drop a 1 in the chat box just so we can see you, celebrate Pride with you? Okay, I see you. Dang, look at those rolling. I love it. Bienvenidos. Look at that, everybody. How beautiful. How beautiful to hold space, to prioritize us in this space, right? We are celebrating your presence. We are celebrating your identities. We're celebrating the diversity of the Latinx Hispanic communities. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are here today as a supporter, an ally, a friend, a colleague, and you're just saying, I love y'all. I want to be here. I want to be better for you. I want to learn more. Drop a 2 in the chat box. We want to see the allies in the house because we welcome you too. We need you. We need you as we go through the struggle as well as the triumphs together. We need y'all. So look at those. There are so many of you here. I'm like, this is so beautiful. Maybe this is common for you. I'm like, this is a big group. This is beautiful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for identifying those for today. I hope it goes without saying, we're going to be really leaning into the stories of the number ones today, because this is an opportunity for us to, of course, come together collectively, but we're also going to come together in a way where we are prioritizing, uplifting, celebrating those who identify as Latinx Hispanic folks. So let me roll into this. I want to start off, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself here. This is a space for everybody, but I wanted to lead with authenticity. I also want to lead with vulnerability and letting you know a little bit about who I am so you know who the facilitator is in this space. So my name is Dr. Christine Coleman. My maiden name is Shayeste. That is an Iranian name. My father is from Iran. My mother is Mexican. My mother and grandmother, my abuelita right there in this photo, they raised me together. I'm an only child raised by my single mama and my grandma. Anybody in the house raised by their abuelitas or extended family members, that is very, very, very much a huge part of my story, being raised in a Mexican-American household, speaking both English and Spanish, which makes me a very fluent Spanglish speaker. I wish I could tell you I do speak Spanish real well, but I probably speak Spanglish better. I was raised around around a lot of Latinx and American people in combination. So my identity is between being myself of dual ethnicities in an American society and around Latinos who were coming in from different parts of the world. It was a lot. And I didn't really realize that, right? And I wonder if us here with the number one have similar stories of kind of like Selena, right? Like, I'm not Mexican enough, I'm not American enough, right? Well, for me, it was like, I'm not Mexican enough or Iranian enough or American enough. I'm trying to do all three. It's a lot, right? I'm juggling all of this. So I just want to keep that very real. I have been told things about my identity, the way I present, and we'll unpack this. I want to tell you this for a reason, that I sound white, and maybe you might agree, right? But for me, that was a really interesting comment to receive since being a little girl all the way up into being Doctora Coleman, right? So to be told I sound white was maybe a compliment from some, maybe some shade from others, right? And I didn't know what to do with that. And I learned over time, especially in doing this more predominant work around DEI, around anti-racism, around mental health, and how our cultures show up in our mental health progress and experiences, that impacted me. That impacted me deeply. And it continues to be something I explore even as a grown-up adult. I have worked with a variety of folks from marginalized backgrounds, including Latinx folks, immigrants, and other marginalized communities. And on the topic of today, I have felt like I do not belong. I have felt like I do not belong. It is a constant wrestling, a journey, a sense of progress that I have overcome, and also know that I have a long way to go. So a question for everybody: can you all so vulnerably and powerfully drop a 1 in the chat box if you've ever felt like you do not belong? You do not belong in your communities. You do not belong in your workplaces. You do not belong in your families. You do not belong in this country or that country, this region, that region. I ask you that for a reason, because I see them rolling in. I see you. I see you. I see you. I'm with you. And I promise we're going to have a good time today. But if any things come up for you that are emotional, that you sense some tears coming up in you, that's okay. That's why we're here, right? That's why we're here. We do not feel like we belong for a variety of reasons. And although we are focusing today on the Latinx Hispanic community, I also see you, whether you identify this way or not. So thank you. And thank you for allowing space for me to share a little bit about what I'm bringing in to this space together. So let's jump into the information. Our quick overview today, we're going to define and discuss DEIB. Some of you might be very familiar with this. Amazing. We'll just do a quick refresh. We're going to explore, though, how DEIB applies to Latinx or Hispanic individual and professional intersectional identities. Again, the term intersectional or intersectionality theory might be familiar to some of you, to others not, and that's okay. And I do not have time to go through it all. It's such a wonderful, wonderful theory that I would love for you to unpack further if you have the moment to. We're going to identify common mental health stressors that Latinx folks experience personally and professionally from time to time. And my hope for you all is that you can walk away with an empowered sense of self, especially to the number ones in the house. But that really truly goes for all of us, to walk away with a greater tie to our belonging, to say, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, I'm showing up authentically in my full self. And with that, because I'm a mental health professional, and this is Mental Health America, I also hope to refine, review, maybe share new forms of self-care, because we all need those reminders from time to time, don't we? All right, everybody, so let's jump into it. Again, you might have noticed that I was using the terms Hispanic, Latinx interchangeably, and there's a reason why, especially for the purpose of this time together today. Many folks still, understandably so, identify as Hispanic. Many folks say Hispanic, I'm so used to saying Hispanic Latinx, Hispanic Heritage Month, right? But when we break it down, we also know that these terms, these identities, these labels have evolved over time. And if you're someone like me, some folks maybe don't like the evolution of terms. I believe the evolution of terms, including evolution of discovery and empathy towards people and communities, should evolve over time. So some of us are uncomfortable with the evolution of terms, but I also want us to know, as we learn more, hopefully we do better, right? You know more. What is it? You know better, you do better. Why am I messing that up? You know what I mean. Hispanic is a term historically from that's connected to people from Spain. People from Spain or of Spanish-speaking origin. And if we go back to the history, which again, I do not have all the time to unpack today, but I want us to think about that, about the colonization that many of our Latin American countries have experienced historically, which have brought over a term that has been used even in the United States, or maybe in your region as well, to consider folks who are not quite from Spain, but have been integrated or have been colonized to use this term. And so we identify this as well. So maybe some folks are saying, no, I don't actually identify with Hispanic. I don't know why I've been calling myself Hispanic this whole time. Or maybe, listen, even though that is something that maybe I technically am not from Spain, I still speak Spanish. I still identify with a Hispanic identity, and that's okay. All right. Other folks might say, well, listen, I have grown up being called Latino, Latina, which by definition is people of Latin American descent living in the United States. That's a formal definition. Some folks might say that's different. You don't have to live in the United States. And I understand and agree with that as well. But right here, the point of me sharing this is the O and the A. In the Spanish language, many of us might know there's a lot of masculine, feminine built in there, right? And so as we see the Latinx progress over time, right, where scholars, researchers, community members come together and say, I don't identify with O or A. I'm non-binary. I'm a person who doesn't identify with certain gender normative labels. All right. So Latinx is an opportunity for us to be more inclusive in the Latinx Hispanic community, to use more gender neutral terms that are non-binary for Latino or Latina in an effort to be more inclusive. Right. And I see you in the chat box. Thank you for saying that. I didn't include this in the slide, but I also want to add, we're also seeing a lot more usage of Latine and E. Think of the term, anybody ever heard of the term estudiante? Interesting, right? That even with the history of Latino, Latina, masculine, feminine, estudiante found its way in there, and maybe other terms like that too. So we use the E in place of an O, A, or even X or X, right? So in this, the spirit of prioritizing the Hispanic, Latinx, Latino, Latina folks in the house, why don't you take a moment, number ones, to drop your preferred identity? Which do you prefer to be called out of the ones listed here? Because this, if you're sitting here as an ally, is a wonderful example, like pronouns, right? Like who are yous? Let's just ask, what do you prefer to be identified as? I prefer to be identified as Latina. Chicana is also in there too. Thank you for highlighting that. Those who are from California, we've also adopted a term called Chicana, Chicano, maybe Chicanx as well, Chicane. I don't actually know if I've heard that, but I imagine that could be where we can see sorry, I was looking at this and I lost my train of thought, pardon me, where we can see that there's an identity specific to the Californian experience. I also see Afro-Latina. I love that. I love that. I love Mexicana. I love that you're also bringing in hyphenating American. I love it. Mexicana and Latina, maybe the specificity of your particular country or region is important to you, right? So I love this, everybody. Thank you for holding that space. Thank you for speaking your voice, because a lot of times if people don't know, they put terms on us that actually don't feel true to who we are. And that continues to snowball the effect of us being erased or minimized in these spaces, which leads to what? I don't belong here. I don't feel seen here. I don't feel valued here. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that in. Number two, is y'all still with us? Y'all seeing this? This is beautiful. Thank you again. Keep those coming, everybody. So for the sake of this time together, I'm going to be using Latinx, Hispanic, but again, I see you. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I see a question here. Could this be part of the reason to feel you don't belong? Erased Indigenous identity, 100%. Would y'all agree? Drop some love on that comment there if you see it coming through, if that feels something that, yeah, if we have been erased, if we have been put terms on us, even that's just the number one, right? People don't even know all the other deep layers of us. But if we're being told that we are of a specific term, but specific because it's historically just what it's been for us without us even really being able to create those names and terms for ourselves, that can definitely be part of that erasure, right? Of our history, our particular regional history that we belong to. Beautiful. This is coming together so wonderfully, everybody. Okay, let's move into, again, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. If this is, again, is familiar information to you, roll with me for a minute. If this is new, fantastic. Again, I have an hour with you. There's a lot to unpack here that I'm not going to be able to get to. So bear with me as I give you kind of just the basics of this, but again, with purpose of our topic today. So I really, really love that our companies, our organizations, our politics, our societies generally are welcoming, are adopting diverse initiatives, diverse prioritizations, right? We know that over time, we are inching towards, I believe, more diversity, especially in our workplaces, right? This is the work I do. I work a lot with companies and organizations, and I work together to see how are you doing with your diversity initiatives. But when I think of diversity, and I kind of want to hear what y'all have to think about this, again, I'll try my best to keep up with the chat box here. Diversity is like a really good first step. Would you agree? Like, yes, absolutely. Diversity should, I think, be a given, but unfortunately, historically, it's not and still struggles to be. But diversity to me kind of represents like a brochure, like when you look at a poster, you open do people even use brochures anymore? I hope so. They're pretty cool to me. Just like we got a representation of every single person, LGBTQ person, Black person, brown person, we kind of just do this thing and we say, okay, we are diverse, right? But I think we know better than that, because what a lot of companies do is they say, we check the boxes, right? But then folks come in with their lived experiences, with their languages, with their educational backgrounds that are diverse in and of themselves, right? With their belief systems, with their various identities, but don't belong because they're saying we check the box of diversity, but that's about all you get. You still have to what? Fit in to the historic culture of this workplace, right? And when we try our best to shave off the authentic parts of ourselves to fit in, conform, whatever term you feel led to use, it can cause us to be molding ourselves versus bringing in our full selves, right? I want to just make sure everybody knows you're in your workplace, you're in your educational space because you deserve to be there, especially my number one, folks. Many times our countries, our politics, our societies tell us it was because it was a handout, because we needed to fulfill the diversity roster, right? You are qualified, y'all. You are smart. You are deserving, just like everybody else, right? So when we are told we check the diversity box, we check that off, right? What we need to do better at continuously, this is a job, this is ongoing work. This is why I believe the erasure or the dismissiveness of DEI roles is really harmful, because diversity is but one step. We need to be working harder on making our spaces more inclusive. What is inclusion? Thoughts, ideas, perspectives of all individuals. They matter. They matter. And to take it a step further, equity, the fair treatment of all people to ensure participation and advancement. Listen, I wish that we were all treated equally. I wish that if we all got the same things, we would all roll the same ways. But in just a moment, we're going to be talking about power, privilege, and oppression. And we know by being born into certain systems that are labeled as privilege or oppressive or as oppressive, we know we're not all given the same thing from the jump. Right? So if we're not able to walk into spaces with the same things, then why should we continue to be given the same thing as everybody else when it actually might not work for us? Especially when people can't even get the terms of how we identify right? So I want us to think about diversity, great first step, but are we including folks? Are we making equitable opportunities across the workplace, across our communities? And what we're talking about today, which is actually something I'm so deeply committed to, is the belonging. That's the mental health part of me, especially because we know that belonging is a core human need. And when we don't feel like we belong, it really does affect our performance, our productivity, our psychological safety, our emotional safety. So real quickly here, belonging engages full potential of the individual, where innovation thrives and views, beliefs, and values are integrated. Okay, so we want all these to work together. And as we talk about this topic today, I want us to think about our personal experiences, everybody here today. In what places have you felt like, okay, I'm around diverse people, but I actually don't feel like everybody here is being included or valued or seen? They're sitting at the table, but their ideas are not being implemented. People keep on talking over them and not giving them a chance to share. People keep on getting promoted, but around the people who are supposed to be representing the diversity here, they don't actually get a fair shot, right? So we need to be looking around, thinking about others, as well as reflecting on ourselves. What needs to change? What needs to change? So drop a 1 in the chat box, everybody, if you have ever heard of the term, familiar with the term, studied, practice, intersectional theory. It's okay if you have not. I see quite a few of you have. Fantastic. Again, very broad overview here I'm going to give you today, but I think it's really important. My doctoral research included a lot about intersectionality theory that was crafted, created, and molded by the brilliant Kimberly Crenshaw, a scholar who has contributed to critical race theory and other really impactful theories that exist today. And really, what I want us to think about is this is based on our identities that have been given to us outside of our personal identities. So I say that because a lot of folks say, don't really love when I talk about this. Many folks do, especially the number ones, which are fantastic because y'all get it. But many times it's very, very uncomfortable because people, even to this day, don't like to talk about their privilege. People feel ashamed by it, defensive by it, and so forth. And my urge to you today is, especially if you're here as an ally, is to think about all of us have privilege. All of us do. And many of us also were born into oppressive systems, right? And it's really difficult to extend empathy when we're operating in defensiveness, when we're operating in discomfort, right? So we can be uncomfortable, but still put on our armor of empathy and lean in to listen. So intersectionality theory really bases, let me just define it here, kind of a wordy definition, but I'm gonna give it to you anyway. A matrix of domination that is composed of interlocking, kind of like this diagram here, systemic or systematic oppressions that are generated by intersections among race, ethnicity, class, and sexuality. In this model, you'll also see things like disability is factored in there, nationality is factored in there sometimes. Sometimes people add in religion because we know based on certain regions, certain religions have more dominance than others. And others also are included, might be age, right? Where, and age is one that's actually really interesting because folks can consider being a younger person a privilege, but then also folks who are older tend to also get more opportunities, but that one's a little bit more of a slippery slope. So for today, we're really going to focus on these that are listed here. And I want you to think about yourselves, because this is where the really beautiful work can happen, right? I want us to think about how beautifully complex we all are. So let me go back to our number ones. Let's think about me, for example. I'll just give you an example of myself. Some of the privileges that I hold systemically, right? The things that I did not ask for, the things that were created by the powers that be far long before. And again, I'm just to be really clear, I'm talking very specifically about the United States. And I recognize that not everybody here might be from the United States or be familiar with United States societal histories and current, even those that are still upheld to this day. So please bear with me on that. But what I do invite you to do is first, if you can listen into my example, that would be fantastic to give you all a better idea of how that might apply to you. And then secondly, even folks who are not from the United States are quite familiar with how this might apply to you. Think about maybe where you're most familiar in your society. Are there systemic levels of oppression and privilege that have been built into your societal models that maybe you can think about? Okay, so I want to make sure that I name that, because I know that not all of us are familiar or privy to what I'm fully discussing here, and I want to call you all into. So some of the systemic privileges that I hold, right, it are that I was born here. And you might say, why do you say that? Well, because I think many of us know that people who are born in the US have access to more privilege. How do we know that? We turn on the TV, we turn on our social media and check to see how immigrants are treated, especially the ones who are Black and brown. Okay, so being US born has granted me privileges, again, that I did not ask for, just like folks who are not born here did not ask for their statuses either, right? Tied to that, just to take it a step further, I speak English. And I think many of us who, again, my abuelita, she speaks some English, but I have witnessed the way that she and other people who are Spanish speakers are treated on their everyday basis. Okay, so remember when I told you I sound white? To a degree, I probably learned that to survive, and I probably am going to cry a little bit. I know y'all will hold me in that, and I hold you in this too. It is painful to see our generations past and our current generations in the treatment that we receive. And there are ways, I'm sure if some of you have kind of, been told, let's keep on going, be the one, be that person in your comunidad to trailblaze through it. I'm proud to be doctora. I really am. But I had to do a lot of work, not just this kind of work, not just reading. I had to do a lot of identity work to see, well, what's going to keep me safe in these spaces? Maybe the way that I speak contributes to that. But we're going to talk about code switching in a minute, and I'm going to hold that, but I want you all to think about being a native English speaker is not something I'm like, ooh, look at me, but it's something that I probably had to learn, and maybe some of us had to learn too, maybe to refine our accents, maybe to speak in different ways, right? Because we know it's tied to privilege, because we know there's a survival mechanism out of that. Middle class. I was actually born into a middle class family. My mom was the first in her family to get a master's degree. Go mommy. And she paved the way. She came from a lot of poverty, paved the way for me. And to this day, I believe that we continue to uphold a middle class status. And that, to me, I know has granted us a lot of privileges. I am able-bodied, meaning that I am able to generally walk around, move about in ways that this society has crafted for maybe folks who are able-bodied. But ask a person who might have a cognitive or physical disability, right? How they have to think about how to maneuver, how they can take tests, how they can read certain things and maybe have difficulties reading certain things, right? The way that privilege shows up is that we say, well, the majority of us are normal and the rest of y'all are not, so go figure it out, essentially, right? And that is so unfair. So I recognize I'm able-bodied and my life is likely easier because I am, but it doesn't mean that I'm better. It just means I have that privilege. I'm going to be grateful for it. And I'm going to seek out opportunities to be an ally, to show up for others who don't have that same privilege as me. And I also identify as straight cisgender, which again, when it comes to the LGBTQ community, I saw some of you are in the house, how I know that there is privilege tied to that part of my identity, Whereas we know that there's so much discrimination, hatred, and violence towards the LGBTQ community that we need to continue to uphold, protect, and stand up for at all costs. Real quickly, on the flip side, I also identify as a woman. And we know that for women across countries, across globally, right, women are seen as the less dominant gender. And women tend to be treated that way. So women are often up against sexism, which essentially is defined as because you're a woman, you are less than, right? We also come up against things like misogyny, which is a hatred because you are a woman. And if you take it a step further, if there are Black women in the house, love y'all, see y'all, misogynoir is a term that is used to define the horrors of the specific hatred towards Black women. Okay, so we're not just making this up, y'all. This is systemic. This is deep rooted. We're not even talking about I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a race car driver. Well, those are our added identities, but we need to identify when we talk about belonging, right? What are we holding just by existing? So last but not least, you all saw that I identify as Mexican Iranian. And that is something that has been challenging to me on a micro level and a major level. I get the microaggressions all the time. And I also have gotten the very blatant ones like, go back to your country, you're a terrorist. I moved into my neighborhood, which is fairly affluent. People told me probably within the first months, what are you doing here? You need to leave. I'm not making this up. And I live in Oakland. And that is scary, right? So I have had a lot. We're going to move into, actually, let me just pause here. I have a lot of those experiences. And the reason that I'm naming mine is to hopefully give you a better idea to think about, what do I hold that is associated with systemic privilege and systemic oppression? And how do they impact me and my lived experiences? And I see y'all, some people are already unpacking theirs in the chat box, and I wish I could go back and read all of them. But please, 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 this is serious. This is important, right? How do they influence us? How do they impact our sense of belonging when we didn't even ask for this? Especially on the oppressive side, we didn't even ask for this. Yeah. Okay. So let's move into common mental health stressors. Drop a one in the chat box if anybody else has ever felt stressed or anxious. Let's just keep it real. I see you. I see you. I'm not smiling because I'm happy for it. I'm smiling because I expect that, because most of us have had moments of anxiety, some moments of stress, maybe some more than others, right? But I want us to think about, when we kind of focus and refocus back to the Latinx Hispanic community, right? I want us to think about, what can common health stressors be for us as people? And then we'll take it a step further into how these stressors can impact Latinx Hispanic communities particularly, okay? So anxiety, just to unpack this here, because even though these are probably really common terms to you, I see folks get them quite confused. So I just hope to break this down just a little bit more simply. So anxiety is an intense feeling of fear and worry about everyday occurrences. And stress is a feeling of emotional or physical tension. It comes from an event or a thought that makes you feel frustrated, nervous, or angry. So what I want you all to just make sure that you are aware of is, because sometimes it can feel very similar even in our bodies. Anxiety, I also define as like the fear of the unknown, and it's rooted in the worry, right? I'm worried, I'm nervous about something. Oh, I can't stop worrying about that. We become fixated on that worry, and then it brings about different physiological responses in us, and it can often take up a lot of our space. And that can be similar to stress too, but stress, again, well, I want us to think about, where do you hold the stress in your body? Right? It's emotional stress. It can be physical stress. It can be tied to an event or thought that makes you feel a lot of frustration, right? A lot of nervousness or even anger. So the emotions there are also a bit different. But I want us to think about that as we relate and as they pertain to the Latinx or Hispanic community. So I want us to think a little bit about imposter syndrome. As I coach and as I'm a therapist to predominantly communities of color, I hear a lot about imposter syndrome. And maybe you feel that, maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're curious about that. Maybe you've never heard of this term, and that's okay. This picture on the top right is kind of just a brief overview of what imposter syndrome can sound like in your head. What if they found out that I actually don't know what I'm doing with this role, right? I'm not smart enough to be here. Maybe I should just quit. yeah, maybe I fought for this, but maybe it was because of affirmative action. Maybe I actually don't deserve this. I shouldn't have even applied, right? And so forth. So imposter syndrome can make it feel like that. And imposter syndrome to a lot of folks is actually a very comforting term because, like you said here, yes, I see you. It's relatable. It's like, oh, that's what it is. Okay. And we like that. Typically, some people say, I don't like labels. Some folks, especially as mental health professionals, just tell me what I have. Just diagnose me, just put the term on me. I feel so much comfort in that. And I feel you on that. I do. The problem I have with imposter syndrome, and again, I don't have all the time I wish I could spend with y'all to unpack this, but I want you to hear this from me. If you don't take away anything else today, please take this away. Please do take this away. As I said earlier, especially to my number one folks, you're not an imposter. You're not. You are meant to be there. Everybody is learning. Everybody is growing. You are not an imposter. Okay. And you also, because maybe there's some uncertainty there or some growing or learning there, it's not a syndrome. You don't have a disease. There's not something wrong with you. Okay. When we talk about those systems, as we just looked at a moment ago, everybody, right? Those systems have been built into the institutions that you're in now. So this call for diversity, as much as it's important, is like coming up against an historic institutions that have never wanted you there in the first place. They didn't want me. They don't want us. They weren't built or designed for us. They were built for very specific people, right? Typically white males, to uphold those systems. It's really interesting. My husband is a Black man, and we were looking, as he was looking for a job. I just tell you guys this very honest story. He was looking at different jobs. He works in investing and finance. And we were looking at just different jobs. We were looking at like the staff at various things. And there was not one person who was not a white male on their team pictures at multiple websites. And this was like a year ago. So we talk about diversity. Many of you here are diverse in various forms, not just in race or gender, but you are here because you're saying, I deserve to be here, but it doesn't always feel like that. And I want us to think about, what are we up against? And I know that there's some white male hating people out there. I'm not even that. I'm just saying there are systems that I don't like. I don't like white supremacy. I don't want you to like white supremacy either. But white supremacy and institutions that uphold systems will continue to make us feel like we're the problem, like we're the phonies, instead of us looking at like, hey, I'm trying to infiltrate a system here that wasn't designed for me in the first place. Maybe it's not me. So it's really important for us to think about imposter syndrome as, okay, cool, relatable. And I know that I'm working up against something far bigger than me. So I want to be a part of the solution. This is where I call the allies in, right? I'm here. I might identify as male. I might identify as white. I might identify as cisgender, and all the different privilege associated factors that we just identified. But if we want to really call people in, we need to create a sense of safety and let people know you're not an imposter, right? You're not a phony. All of us are out here doing our best, right? Okay. Assimilation are typically is used as a term where immigrant groups are encouraged to adopt social, cultural, political norms to benefit from citizenship status. And some of us who might even be born in the US, or again, if you're not here, maybe you find that in your own regions as well, but specific to the United States, it can be immigrant groups. But again, I was born here and I also still find myself assimilating to a lot of different normative cultures, right? And that can be, again, another form that can make us shrink, that can make us feel like we have to shed our identities to conform and fit in for a variety of reasons. And most of them, again, are for safety, emotional safety, psychological safety, many times even physical safety. So I want us to think about, in what ways in your life, number ones, have you had to assimilate, right? To maybe get your foot in the door, to maybe get that opportunity and that in that academic institution, to maybe just be taken seriously in your community or in communities that maybe don't represent the folks you grew up with. It's a lot. It's a lot. Xenophobia, racism, and discrimination. Xenophobia, for folks who might not be familiar, is a hatred or even a fear of folks who are not from your country. And we see the way that the fear can be translated many times in violence, and many times in hatred. And our families, maybe some of you have experienced xenophobia. Maybe, like I told you, people have told me, go back to your country. I'm like, I was born here. What are you talking about? But They don't see anything else but what I look like. And if they got to know me, if they got to know you, I wonder if people would say the same thing. But I think that I deserve to be here. But it's sad to me that many people don't feel that way about me or about us, right? Racism and discrimination, I think that that's pretty self-explanatory. I talked about code switching earlier. I'm curious to see if anybody, Latinx, Hispanic, or otherwise, has ever had to code switch. It's the alternating between two languages in conversation. So maybe you talk, maybe you speak Spanish with your familia, and then over here you have to talk like, hey, how's everybody doing today? Maybe we switch the way that we wear our hoop earrings in certain situations. Maybe over there we got to change it up. It's exhausting. Who says that? That's also a Selena. I think that's a Selena reference there. Yes, code switching is exhausting, but we learn to do it. And you know what my clients tell me, y'all? I don't even know who I really am. Isn't that sad when we stop to think about it? Where does the authentic part of me, it is shaming, I see you. Where does the authentic part of me, it does make my brain hurt sometimes too, I see you, live? Right? So this is why our sense of belonging is so core, right? For all of us, but specifically speaking to my number ones here, code switching has been, again, I keep on going back to this survival mechanism that we've had to have. But again, sometimes we're told like you a sellout in your communities, right? Or why you do that over there like that? Or maybe there's some envy there. Maybe there's some jealousy. Maybe there's some sadness. Maybe it's you went over there to be like them and you forgot about us, right? Or maybe it's do more like us and you'll succeed. But what about my communities over there? I don't know where I fit in and I don't know which side to choose. It's a lot. When we think about our anxiety, we think about our stress, we think about depression, we think about racial trauma. Those are things I did not list on that previous slide. We think about the overwhelm, the burnout that we have. Burnout is not a clinical term, but if we have a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety can lead to burnout, and burnout can lead to a lot of depression. So we have to be mindful. Where do I feel safe? Where do I thrive? How can my allies show up for me so I don't have to go about this battle on my own? Outside of the outside factors, we also, like I kind of called in just a moment ago, we have family expectations, we have cultural norm expectations. So it's like, I used to work actually at a high school in a Mission District, and I saw some Bay Area folks out here. I was at a college preparatory school for low income students in the Mission District of San Francisco, and I was the therapist there. And a lot of the girls were like getting these messages. Maybe this is some of your history, everybody, where it was like, go to college, go to college, go to college, but stay back and work for the family, and you can't move out till you're 25, and you better get married first. And, so it's all these different things like, hey, I thought y'all wanted me to thrive. Like, I can't even go away to college. Okay, got it. I'm going to study here, work for the family, take care of my brothers and sisters, right? And still like do all the things you want me to do, but then also like go be better for the rest of us. That was a lot for them. And they had to, I was so thankful to be there with them in that season to help them figure that out together. And it was a lot. And now I work with adults, and maybe some of you are here as adult versions of that. I just like, well, I made it, but I still feel this stress. I still feel this code switching moment. I still feel this dual identity situation happening to me. And I am just feeling stretched. Anybody just feeling, I don't know if I'm stressed, anxious, but I just feel tired. I feel stretched. I feel overwhelmed. Those are the words I hear a lot too. So I feel you, it's not just from the external, it comes from our familias, our cultural norms and expectations too. And sometimes we might see this in our communities too, where substance use and abuse can come up, right, in our own cultures and our own families. But again, think about when mental health and other forms of abuse, it might not just be substance, it might not be usage, it might be toxic relationships, wanting somebody to love you, wanting somebody to see you, right? It might be overworking because you feel like you have something to prove, right? It's a lot. It's not just related to substance, but I also want us to think about, how does substance use and abuse show up in your life, whether it is drugs or alcohol, whether it's food, whether it's people, whether it's work. What are you possibly drawing into to just help you get through it? And if that is something that you're struggling with, please, please, please know there's help out there for you. There's no shame in that. I know there's a deep stigma, especially in the Latinx Hispanic community, around mental health. I'm here to tell you, as a Latina, as a practicing clinician, you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. But if you're feeling like you need help, maybe you need help. You're not supposed to do this alone. Okay. All right, everybody. Real quick here for my number ones as we wrap up for today. Let's see how I'm doing on time. I want us to walk away, all of us, but this is on both slides. I have one for the allies as well. How do I truly establish belonging? It is a human need. Okay. So again, I want us, if anything else, I said this a few times, but if you have another thing to add for today, please know if I am feeling a little left out. Oh, let me say this real quick, everybody. Anybody a fan of Brene Brown? I love her. I hope you do too. If you don't, that's okay. But she's a really great researcher, scholar. She's specializes in shame and vulnerability. And I really love the way that she talks about belonging. She says it's more than just fitting in, which I think a lot of us just say, like, where do I fit in? Right? I go to work. These folks don't really look like me, or these folks don't have the same experiences. Those folks are talking about something else. Like, where do I fit in all of this? My daughter just went to kindergarten. I'm on a quick tangent. And she just started kindergarten. I'm watching her like figure out first day of school, first couple of weeks of school, where do I fit in? Right. And as her parent, I was like, where do I fit in? I don't even know these parents. I'm feeling that too. And I'm an adult. What is it like for this young child to figure out where does she belong? It's a core human need. And Brene Brown says it's more than just fitting in. It is, where can I show up? As I said earlier, right? Where can I show up being my full, authentic self and being celebrated and upheld for that? So yes, we can fit in, but fitting in goes back to what we've been talking about today, is fitting into what's already been created versus creating a truly diverse and inclusive setting, especially in our workplaces where it broadens itself to say we're bringing everybody in to create a new workplace culture where we're not conforming, we're not just fitting in, but we are truly all showing up as our authentic selves. How beautiful would that be if we all had workplaces like that? Right? Or communities like that, or institutions like that, or societies like that, right? So we also want to identify groups and places where you truly feel like you belong. A really beautiful healing moment for some of us who might have had to work so hard on assimilating is, can we go to a baile? Can we go to a movie? Can we go hang out with some folks where there's just really good food to throw down, where our language is spoken, where you can actually just feel like, I can show up. Spanglish has been something really embarrassing for me, but I think I'm working hard on being like, you know what? My authentic self says, I don't know how to speak everything in Spanish. And yet I still feel fully Latina, and I'm really proud of that, right? So where can we go to feel like we belong, where we feel valued, seen, and heard? Maybe not just on your Latinx, Hispanic side, maybe in spaces are just like, I see you, I like all of you, I celebrate all of you. We want to know that belonging helps with our overall health, happiness, and motivation. And we also want to know it takes effort and practice. It can help to look at how we are also similar to others versus different. That's really important for us, because so many of us, when we don't feel like we fit in, we just stay in our kind of space, which is understandable. It's a protective mechanism, right? But we can also think, I might be different to some degree, but so is everybody else to another degree. So how do I actually look for similarities? Not so much to like get myself out there, but to help me also ease some of that anxiety. I can look for, all right, maybe that person's not from my background, but I heard them talk, they're a dad like me, or they enjoy the same sports. Let's look for some similarities here so we don't feel shrunken and we don't feel unsafe in those spaces. That can be our responsibility as well. We can lean into differences and also find ways to connect as well. So we can still say, hey, we're different. We don't have to have the entire similarities, but we're going to step out of our zone to really make sure that I'm connecting otherwise. Let's think of community and acceptance of others. And again, as I've been saying all this time together, you are not alone. For allies, I think that this is some information that you all wanted as well, and I hope it's helpful. This is not my work, but it's from Aduro, and I full-heartedly agree with many of these points here. We want to continue to create a psychologically safe space for our Latinx and Hispanic community members, right? Or colleagues, if you're in the workplace. Leaders in particular should look for opportunities to be an ally, to show up for underrepresented groups. Allyship can look a variety of ways. Again, it might be, hey, that person actually has been talking the whole time. Let's give this person a chance. It could be, you know what was said in that break room, that was not okay. Actually, I actually want us to have a conversation about that, right? Accountability, allyship, showing up, being an accomplice takes a step further and is actually putting yourself in the front line so that you can defend and use that privilege because you know it's going to work. All of us can assemble, right? Which is power. There's power in the people. I fully believe that. But allies, if y'all can be on the front lines with us and for us, that can change things. That can change systems. So we need you, and we need you to help us with the psychologically safe aspect of things and maybe even further. A very human thing, again, talking about human needs. Check in with people, everybody. It doesn't have to be this whole, I'm an ally and let's just show up for everybody. It's in the small, intimate moments. Would you agree? It is really, really important for us to connect, to say, hey, I see you did such a great job, or I don't actually think I know anything outside of your brilliant work. Can we actually just check in? And if folks are open to that, fantastic. But we want to create, again, I see you, I hear you, I value you, right? Checking in with people from time. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It doesn't have to be all the time, but once in a while, consistency is important, and so forth. We want to give people a voice who feel ignored. I mentioned this earlier, so I won't spend too much time on this, but that's so important. Many times I notice that people interrupt me. And I've also been in spaces where I've watched particularly Latinx Hispanic people be interrupted. Women are often interrupted. We need to make sure that we're being mindful that, especially in the Latinx Hispanic culture, it's actually very disrespectful. I imagine it's just a disrespectful thing to do, but particularly it's rude to interrupt. And it's also, it actually, you might notice that some, not everybody, but some Latinx Hispanic folks in your spaces might actually not speak up because they don't want to be rude to interrupt you. But then it ends up leaving us sometimes feeling behind, or like we can't find a way to interject. Again, I'm not speaking truth for everybody. There's some folks who are real vocal and I love that, but we want to also make sure that we're being cognizant of giving people a voice who feel ignored. Celebrate self-identity, which is something we've been working on. And I know that you're here because this is important. Employees feel proud to work for a company that has a positive culture where they can be themselves. That's what we've been talking about this whole time, an authentic self, showing up as your full self, right? There's so much value in that. Ask for input. Do any of y'all do any kind of surveying or town halls or group work where you have opportunities to say, how are we doing with our DEIB initiatives? How are we doing on our people initiatives? Right? How are we doing when we on checking in with how folks are doing mentally and emotionally? We can do that often. That might call in HR, that might call in leadership and so forth. But I think it's really important to be not just thoughtful, but proactive about those things as well. And then maybe some of you come from communities that have employee resource groups or different types of groups, wellness groups, et cetera, that are community led or employee led. Those can be really powerful. I speak at a lot of those, and it's just really beautiful that those continue to unfold. So these are just a few examples. I'm sure there are so many more, but these are important, right? And we're going from, again, the intimate one-on-ones to the larger organizational health of our organizations, our communities, et cetera. So we want to think about, how do I, as one person, as one ally, show up? What's going to be something I need to do to sit in my discomfort of my privilege, but also know I'm here because I want to extend, I want to help, I want to do better, right? Love that, everybody. I see you with the work that your spaces are doing. Fantastic. So as we come to a close for today, I do not want us to rush through or oversee the importance of self-care. Oftentimes I tell my clients, I want you to picture having like a briefcase or some kind of little, maybe a toolbox, maybe a bag. I don't know how you picture it, whatever feels right for you, of self-care tools that when something is causing distress, when something is causing overwhelm, anxiety, discomfort, you don't feel like you belong, you can think, maybe it's, again, it's not literal, but it's figurative, where you can think, okay, right now I need to take 5 deep breaths. Right now I need to, like, working from home, for example, can be really kind of like get me a little feeling like a little fixated in this space here. So sometimes I'll just go to my door and open my door and feel fresh air for 5 seconds. Some of us might have more time and say, I need to disconnect from my work, from my family, from the different things that are overwhelming me. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to call up a trusted friend. I'm going to go dance a little bit. Some of us might need to take it a step further and start setting some boundaries. Self-care, I think, can often be like, let's go to a spa date, or let's go spend a ton of money. I want us to think about what is actually caring for yourself. What does that look like? The self-care tools that are listed here and many, many others are not a one size fits all. We all have to determine, what does caring for myself look like? Sometimes caring for yourself might look like drawing into community. Again, going out into spaces that make you feel like you are not alone. Maybe some of you are saying, I'm so tied to community, I need some quiet alone time. I see that a lot in the Latinx community, where there's a big families and big connections. And sometimes it's, I need that quiet time. Maybe you're drawing, maybe you're reading, maybe you are, I have little kids, and since they were babies, they like to play rain sounds when they go to sleep. Those have been really, really healing for me, because the calming sounds, we can do those on apps or find things like that. That's pretty easy. YouTube can really just kind of get our nervous system that might be kind of going a little out of whack back to center, to calm us down. Maybe some meditation, some mindfulness, laughter. What do y'all do to laugh? I see you with your 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 breathing technique. I love it. I see you with the working out. Tattoos. How beautiful. Thank you for calling that in. Thank you so much. Yes. So I'm listing them here. What I would love to see you all do in this chat box situation here, drop in your self-care tools. You know what's cool when I do these talks, everybody, is that I love to list mine, but I love to actually see yours, because many people will say, I never thought of that. Let me take that with me, add it to my box, right? And if you have a few in your self-care toolbox, everybody, you might get to know yourself so well. That's my hope for you, that you say, this one works in this situation, this one works in that situation. I know what I need. I know my care routine so well that I know what I need and what works best for me in those moments. Simultaneously, we also know what doesn't work, right? Maybe you're like, I will never do yoga. That's just not what I like to do, but I love me some Zumba, right? So whatever it is for you, I want you to think about that. Look at these coming in. I'm not going to catch all of them. Dancing, reading. I saw someone else say prayer, being home alone, being in nature, buying yourself something beautiful, take a drive, being outside, walking and breathing on purpose, being intentional with that. I love it. Laughter, gardening, meditation, walking on the beach barefoot. That sounds glorious right now. Reorder. I love to, when I'm stressed out, trust me, out my room, my husband's like, what happened to the house? I'm like, I'm having a moment. Bear with me. Oh, I love it. Aromatherapy, walking your dog, weightlifting, etc. Like, keep those coming. 10 minutes per day. Thank you for calling that in. Self-care, again, is like, some people say, let me put it on my calendar, and I recognize we're almost at time here. Let me, if y'all can hear me on this for just one moment. Self-care in the midst of all the busyness of our lives can feel like another thing we have to add on our to-do list, right? And that can be really daunting. And some folks say, add it to your calendar so it's just as important as your work meetings and so forth. And that's great. If that works for you, if that's how you're organizing your brain, fantastic. But one thing that I also wish and hope for is that we also can get it to be just a part of our habitual practice too. Because when I talk to folks, I ask folks about their self-care routines and they say, I don't have any, right? I'm not a priority to myself. And a lot of folks will also tell me, I grew up with a parent working 2, 3 jobs. I grew up watching my family struggle. Where was there time for self-care? So we have to kind of call in that, like, yeah, our ancestors might have not always gotten the opportunity for self-care, or maybe their self-care looked different. Maybe it was having drinks with the family, right? Maybe it was the parties. Maybe it was like, what was my dad doing over there on his chair? Maybe that was his form of just kind of decompressing, right? So we have to kind of think about this a little maybe unconventionally. Some of us kind of in this more American culture, or maybe like even modern culture, we have kind of just this one-sided version of it, but maybe it's just like I'm connecting with my comadres or my friends or people, or maybe again, I'm taking these walks and so forth. Maybe you can call in generations past and say, what did they do? Because our indigenous communities, they knew how to self-care. I don't have the video with me. I'm going to have to try to find it. I'll try my best to pass it on to you. It's this beautiful video I saw at a conference of an indigenous community in Mexico talking about mental health. But like, it was so not like how we talk about it, but it was mental health. It was healing. It was restorative. It was powerful to see that. And I don't want us to get it twisted when we talk about belonging and celebrating Latinx and Hispanic heritage. We don't have to conform entirely. We can take what we need. We can take what's beneficial. Some of our families don't necessarily honor our mental health and celebrate our belonging. They tell us we got to do this to fit in here for a better life. And that is probably well-intended, but can sometimes make us feel really confused or small. But we have to also call in our heritage that goes far beyond us, have beautiful practices too. So we're going to call them in and celebrate them, especially as we talk about self-care and finish up. So I know we are here today to wrap up. I know we're past time. Everybody, if you want to stay in touch with me, here's my email, here's my website. My Instagram is Dr. Christine Coleman, as well as my LinkedIn, Dr. Christine Coleman. It has been an honor and a pleasure with you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Feliz Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Coleman. That was just such a fantastic hour. I know we could go on longer and longer throughout today, but thank you everyone for joining us, for your comments, for your vulnerability in the chat. It was really beautiful to listen and read along to everyone who's been sharing in there. So just a reminder, it is being recorded. I know you had a few questions about that, and I'll be sure to send out the recording. You'll receive that via email within the week. So thank you all so much for being here today, and an extra special thank you to Dr. Coleman. We so appreciate you sharing on this topic. It was just lovely. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, your week, and we will be in touch soon.